Space is a forever frontier. A lot of the hegemony only goes out to as far as the Orion Arm, and not even in its entirety. And that's the furthest lengths that the blink gate system actually goes, or some of the potential furthest colonies. That's not even talking about the blank spots in between each gate. The whole mess that is cosmopolitan populations, the diaspora, small colonies on some desert world in the middle of nowhere, forgotten by the rest of the hegemony. It's out here that have warlords, pirates, bandits, a lawless final frontier asking for a mech with a big iron on their hip. Hi, hello, and welcome back to LANCER, our favorite mech tabletop RPG, and today we're talking about the Cowboy Mech themselves, the Raleigh. Another wondrous addition to the IPS-N line, and screams diaspora and cosmopolitan, particularly with the final frontier. The very, cowboys in space cowboy. You're Western. Your spaghetti space western. And it wasn't too much of an exaggeration of being designed to take on those fights or that lawless frontier. This was meant for fleet-wide contracts. A new design to try and fill a similar role to either the GMS Everest or the Sherman from HA, except aiming for a bit more of a close-quarters battle mech. For a while, IPS-N was really behind this, the Raleigh being their flagship model for a time, though not many of those contracts were actually picked up. No fleet-wide contracts that could really justify it being their flagship. Really a failure in the eyes of IPS-N from its lack of adoption on the front lines. So IPS-N quietly took it away from their flagship, stopped promoting it, and replaced it with the Tortuga as their flagship model, which did see success on some fleet-wide contracts. But the Raleigh is not entirely forgotten. Those test pilots loved it. The dexterity, the close quarters fighting, the integrated weapon in its chest, and the suite of reliable kinetics it had on board. A dexterous close quarters fighting chassis that's now seen as a bit more of a niche, quiet popularity. So instead of the front line, you have the lone gunman on the frontier. But we have the 5th IPS-N license and the 5th column. Now when we're actually covering this video, there's going to be things that you get at license level, so leveling up in Lancer. Almost everything you unlock on these you can mix and match on different chassis. But that being the key word, the chassis itself you unlock at LL2, which is what we'll be covering first. That is the base of your mech, and all these other components can be added on or swapped onto other chassis. So don't worry, the hand cannon you can put on other mechs. The mech-sized revolver. But enough about that. To the chassis itself, with the Raleigh as compared to the Everest, the general starting frame you get at LL0. And while you might be seeing a lot of red at the moment, it's more just to reflect a lot of IPS-N or the fact this is meant to be a durable and just mechanics-based chassis. So it doesn't have anything fancy for E-defense, or any kind of electronic attack, and as well as its heat capacity, it doesn't have many systems that would push it. It's not a bunch of delicate, overheating lasers or reactors, just reliable kinetics. And then lower system points, cause just old reliable. Just need a revolver, no system points there. And then a little bit of armor for handling the front lines, that close quarters combat, and just an alright chassis. And the stat line, that is. The license is where a lot of the goodies are. And its traits. But you've seen it already, you've got the arrows, taken a picture or whatever, we're moving on to the mounts. So as to its mounts, to begin with, it's a size 1 mech, your average size between the lot of them, but again, this is meant to be a front lines chassis and a close quarters fighter. This has an auxiliary mount, a double auxiliary mount, a flex mount, and a heavy mount. This is meant to be the gunboat, the big gunslinger. Multiple revolvers to pull from or other heavy weapons, possibly a reliable melee when you get in close quarters. Lots of mounts for lots of options. But now onto the traits with full metal jacket. So it triggers at the end of your turn, and if you haven't attacked or forced to save on anyone, all of your loading weapons instantly reload. So you can use this time for movement, exiting or entering your mech, some improvised action, manipulating the terrain, other things that aren't just attacking. And not just one, but all loading weapons you have on you. Just a single break turn in between all that firing. While this definitely plays up into some of the weapons it has later on and within its license, not bad to have as a core chassis for an artillery mech. Next is shielded magazines, those reliable kinetics. The Raleigh, even when jammed, can still make ranged attacks. So things that would be screwing with your sensors, including visual, that would normally stop you from making such a ranged attack, doesn't stop the Raleigh. Now for its core power, the M35 Mjolnir cannon. Another holdover taken from another design department of IPS-N and then placed on a chassis. Taken from their Watchman line of defensive weapons and applied for a more active close quarters combat role. A multi-barrel, magnetically accelerated cannon that fires multiple airburst projectiles at close range targets. And there's two fun things about it. One is still tied to the lore of it, as it's described as an impulse cannon, with one CompCon or NHP overlooking and moderating it. So impulse is the fact that it's just based off instinct, hooked back into your neural bridge, or the studied movements of the pilot looked over by the CompCon or NHP. So in a split-second decision, when you think about firing, the cannon will fire. Of course, the action's moderated by whatever else is on board, so it's not firing all the time. But that impulse is so subtle that it doesn't even need the pilot to be fully conscious to function. Described as a dead man's switch, to the point that it only stops working with total systemic failure. A chassis could be down and out, the pilot basically dying in the cockpit, and it will still fire at anything passing by. And the second fun part is this is a core integrated weapon. So not the active ability, you can just use this. So it's a main close quarters combat weapon with a range of 5, threat of 3, and 4 kinetic damage. It's a bit funky on when you can fire it, so once per round when you're reloading a weapon, as a free action you can fire it at an enemy. So even without Full Metal Jacket, after you've fired and are going to reload a weapon, you can still have the Mjolnir fire. Just keep throwing lead down range. And next is the active Thunder God. We're going to fan the hammer on this. So activating as a protocol, the M35 begins spinning up, being loaded with 2 full rounds, and until you fire it, each round you'll gain another 2 up to 6. And when you finally fire it, everything fires simultaneously, dealing that flat 4 kinetic damage per loaded projectile. No dice rolled, it just does 4 kinetic damage per projectile. And on top of that, when you fire it with 4 or more rounds, the attacks gain AP and shred the target, until the end of their next turn. And the fun thing, this protocol doesn't end when you fire it. The moment it's empty, it'll just begin loading 2 rounds again, for the entire scene. You can just keep having this spinning up, saving it up to 6 or just going up to 4 to get the AP and shredded. Or just being able to fire the immediate 2 shots at once instead of 1. Even without waiting or skipping around to keep charging up, you're still getting 2 free shots with Mjolnir instead of 1. Thunder God proper with that many airburst rounds firing. But with that, we finally make it to LL1 with the first weapon of the license, the hand cannon. Big iron, big iron. An auxiliary close quarters battle weapon with a range of 5, threat 3, and 1d6 kinetic damage. With its 2 traits, reliable 1, so even if you miss it does 1 damage, and then loading. So with all the stats out of the way, this isn't a nickname with what the weapon is. It's not like the blowtorch nickname on the Lancaster. This is a hand cannon, a modification or an IPS-N classic based off of the GMS pistol design. And while the GMS one has internal mags or some kind of chain feeding into it, IPS-N puts it in a higher caliber, forcing it to have either a cylinder or a magazine. So it's not just a revolver, you can just have a Desert Eagle for a mech. And it's auxiliary. It's a reliable 1 auxiliary weapon. You have the double auxiliary slot on the Raleigh alone. Not to mention this is only a LL1 dip. Anyone can just quickly pick this up. Have a heavy revolver or Desert Eagle on a goblet if you want. And even ignoring the stats, it's a revolver on a mech. It's the Cowboy Mech. Next up is BB Breach Blast charges for 2 system points. You ever play Siege? Because this is a shaped charge. This is meant to breach into buildings, bunkers, ships. And it's a breaching charge that a mech has to place. But like most limited explosions in Lancer, it divides into 2. So first we have thermal grenades, reshaping the shaped charge to be a lot more general and something you just throw into the field. Range of 5, blast of 1, and 1d6 energy damage if you fail the agility save. Half damage if you pass it. And even with the grenade still being a breaching charge of some kind, it deals a flat 10 AP damage to structures and terrain. So if you don't have time to plant it, just quickly chuck it at a wall or a vault door to breach, chasing someone down. Now for the proper breaching charge, a mine which you place down in adjacent space next to you, free adjacent space. However, it doesn't have to be on the floor. It could be on wall, ceiling, anything that you're placing it against as it's secured. It's an agility save, and once again, if you succeed, half damage. If you fail, full 2d6 AP explosive damage. And one of the best parts is its breaching utility, because when it's on objects and terrain, it is a flat 30 AP explosive damage. Given that a good chunk of generic cover within Lancer or structures have a health of 10, that 30 is making sure it can get through a lot. Other than that, its tags are unique, a quick action to use, and limited 3. Another fun mil-spec twist on a civilian tool in mining charges. And continuing on with that mil-spec twist on general mining equipment, we have LL2's Bolt Thrower, a heavy cannon with a range of 8 and dealing 2d6 kinetic and 1d6 explosive. On top of all that damage, it's at least reliable 2 even if you miss, and it's loading, obviously, with how much it's doing. Maybe not obviously, but that's a hefty amount of damage. But once again, a repurposed bit of asteroid mining equipment. A self-propelled bolt that would then lodge itself into a target and then easy to see how someone working at IPS-N adapted that to combat. Next up is Roland's Chamber for 3 system points. Unique system that allows you to modify the next shot of loading weapons. So firstly, this is just an alternative ammunition for a lot of heavy, large kinetic weapons. And it's one of IPS-N's self-contained, small explosive cylinder rounds packed into a mech-sized gun. I say small enough to fit within a mech-sized weapon, which is still massive. But after you reload a loading weapon, the next shot you fire with a loading weapon gains an additional effect. It deals an additional bonus 1d6 explosive damage, and they have to make a hull save or are knocked prone, as the sheer force of the blast hitting them in the chest is throwing them around, or off balance, toppling a lumbering behemoth. And while not necessarily fitting within the category of classic lead downrange, in a setting with advanced laser weapons, plasma, and whatever Horus is doing, simply loading an explosive round into a weapon and firing it, that's a bit more old reliable than these. Kicking off LL3 is our third weapon of the license with the Kinetic Hammer, a heavy melee weapon with a threat of 1 and dealing 2d6 plus 2 kinetic damage, with reliable 4. Even a glancing blow from the hammer is enough to do 4 damage. And this is nothing fancy. No real origin tied to some kind of mining equipment or tool or fancy tech going on in it. It is just a big, heavy hammer. The oldest of old reliables. A bludgeoning object. Yeah, no, not much to say on it, just a big hammer. Fun.
big hammer.
And finishing us off is the Uncle Class CompCon for 3 system points. So we have a CompCon, a companion concierge unit. This is not an NHP. This is a classic programmed to talk and act, to be easy to interact with, but no sentience or strange elder shenanigans. It is just a program. And there's also a weapon mod with everything that it applies to, listed there. So to the history of the Uncle Class CompCon. So this goes back to the IPS-N's Dark Star 2 program, design initiative to push forward IPS-N smart weaponry to meet with its competitors. However, it really didn't get off the ground. Tons of stagnation, internal development issues, and not much actually saw the light of day from Dark Star 2 program. Not much except for the Uncle Class. And to those that do use the Uncle Class, even though it has a bunch of flaws, they swear upon it. Because it is an old reliable sidekick. Because of what it does, it gets to fire one of your weapons for you. So once per round, you can fire the weapon the Uncle Class weapon is attached to as a free action. The attack has +2 difficulty, as it's not you shooting it, and is just a CompCon, but that's a free action to fire that. In addition to the difficulty, it can't have been a weapon you had already used that turn. And you cannot use that same weapon until the start of your next turn, so no overwatching with it, after it's fired. And because it's not an NHP, no worried to like cascade or anything, even though it has the AI tag, just good old reliable tech. But once again, just like the M35 integrated equipment allowing you to fire when reloading, you have an additional feature or trait that allows you to fire a weapon while doing something else, as a free additional action. Not the most reliable with the 2 difficulty, but still, it's more lead down range. And that was the Raleigh, not really playing into the naval theme, but definitely taking from some of the mining equipment, the diaspora, and the frontier, the wanderer, the endless expanse, the final frontier, the duelist, the cowboy. There's no need for fancy tech, no giant lasers, no NHP strapped to the inside of it, and even the fanciest thing on it, the Uncle Class, just has some charm to it. It's a bit there. Less some super weapon system, more just a buddy to help you get another shot off. So even though it's not some mass-produced front line, conquering worlds or bringing them back to order or heal or within the hegemony, it is still seen, it is still used, it's still loved by the pilots that have it, and is still feared by those on the frontier. Because some mech pilot warlord on some dirtball planet in the middle of nowhere might think themselves safe. But Tech Mech Red isn't ready for the mech with a big iron on their hip. Thank you for watching the video on the Raleigh. I looked up how to pronounce the name this time. But yes, the Cowboy Mech, the old reliable. The kinetics, the hand cannon. I do enjoy how it even had in its description that it could be the cylinder or a magazine, allowing you to fit both definitions of hand cannon. And outside of just its styling bringing on the idea of this lone gunslinger or cowboy, its background does that, its lore. The fact that it's a failed, once grand position of a flagship line for IPS-N, tossed to the side, lost in their ways, instead of large front lines on core world somewhere, it's found its home in individual pilots on the frontier, bringing law as the gunslinger. And while it keeps using the term close quarters combat, because to fit the category and the idea of a PR company talking about it, you can just replace anytime you hear close quarters with duels, or dueling. It's the gunslinger. Anywho, thank you again for watching the video, a thank you to my patrons, and have a nice day.